The 1951 movie, The Thing from Another World, was a cult classic, moderately well-received horror film which has been remade 2 times. The first is the even more cult, more classic, and better received John Carpenter film The Thing from 1982. The second is the seldom remembered, poorly received, and utterly pointless 2001 The Thing directed by Matthias Van Heiningen Jr. The first is many people's favorite horror movie of all time, myself included. The second is only ever mentioned to illustrate how it failed where the first succeeded. Film, I think maybe more than any other medium, is able to uplift or utterly destroy the quality of whatever is being adapted in it. With the right team, you can turn a banal, empty story into a masterpiece. And with the wrong team, you can turn a masterpiece into the worst movie you've ever seen. The 2009 movie Fantastic Mr. Fox, directed by Wes Anderson, is an adaptation of the 1970 Roald Dahl children's novel of the same name. Luckily for Wes, Fantastic Mr. Fox is already a great book. It should be easy to adapt it into a good movie, but he and the rest of his team didn't stop there. They gave the already good book the time and effort that you would spend if you were forced to remake something horrible, and it really paid off. In the Roald Dahl book, Mr. Fox makes nightly visits to the farms of Bogus Bunsen Bean so he can steal livestock to feed his supportive wife and 4 nameless fox children. Every night they try to catch him, and every night he comes downwind so he can smell where they're hiding and steal from another part of their farm. Eventually, the farmers say enough is enough and ambush Mr. Fox when he leaves his burrow. However, they are only able to shoot off his tail before he retreats back inside. Bogus Bunsen Bean then elect to dig up the fox's burrow with shovels and then excavators, but the foxes escape by digging deeper. The farmers lay in wait for the moment the foxes will be too hungry to stay in their hole and come back out for food. The foxes spend 3 days underground, and at this point they're starving. Mr. Fox comes up with a plan to get some food. They start using the last of their energy to dig to each of the farmers' properties, stealing their livestock as they go and sending it back to Miss Fox so she can cook them all a feast. After their first stop, they meet Badger, along with the moles, rabbits, and weasels, who inform them that they are also forced underground by Bogus Bunsen Bean, and are understandably upset that Mr. Fox got them wrapped up in this mess. At Bean's cider cellar at their last stop, they meet Rat, who yells at them and calls them thieves when they take their fair share. At the feast, Mr. Fox invites all the animals to live underground with him. After all, they are all burrowing animals. They only go outside for food, and now they have tunnels right to all the food they could ever need. All the animals applaud this idea, calling him a fantastic Mr. Fox. Bogus Bunsen Bean are left waiting for the foxes to emerge. The book ends with the line, and so far as I know, they are still waiting. I think this is pretty obviously a story meant to expose kids to the idea that stealing isn't always a bad thing. Not only that, but attempts to police or hurt everyone in the community, not only the thief. Like how Bogus Bunsen Bean's attempt to catch Mr. Fox forces all the woodland creatures to starve underground. There's even a line that Mr. Fox says to quell Badger's worries about stealing that goes, "Bogus Bunsen Bean are out to kill us. You realize that, I hope. But we're not going to stoop to their level. We don't want to kill them. We wouldn't dream of it. We shall simply take a little food here and there to keep us and our families alive, right? If they want to be horrible, let them. We down here are decent, peace-loving people." The story is outright saying that the harm done by stealing pales in comparison to the harm done by those trying to put an end to it, which is obviously based, but the movie is quite a bit different. Not that these elements aren't present in the movie, but that, instead, the movie emphasizes other things. The movie starts with a flashback to 12 fox years in the past that shows Mr. and Mrs. Fox performing a raid on a squab farm. They trigger a trap, and Mrs. Fox says that she's pregnant, and gets Mr. Fox to agree to getting a safer job if they make it out alive. In modern day, Mr. Fox is a newspaper columnist, and instead of the 4 nameless pups they had in the book, they have a son named Ash, who really wants to be an athlete but doesn't seem cut out for it. Mr. Fox thinks that living in a hole makes him and his family look poor, so he moves into a tree, despite the warnings of his lawyer, Badger, about his proximity to the farms of Bogus Bunsen Bean. At this point, Mrs. Fox's nephew, Christopherson, moves in and makes Ash jealous of his natural ability to be good at most anything, including athletics. Mr. Fox remembers his days of theft and enlists his friend Kylie, the possum, to help him steal the livestock of the 3 farmers. This is about where the book starts. The farmers band together to shoot Mr. Fox once he leaves his house. They shoot off his tail, dig up his house, force him and his family to dig below ground to escape. The foxes starve and decide to dig holes to the farmers' poultry pens. They meet Badger and the other burrowing animals along the way, and they have a feast. This is about where the book ends, but the movie is just beginning. Christopherson and Ash make amends after Christopherson defends Ash from a bully, and they then decide to sneak into Bean's house to steal back Mr. Fox's tail, but Christopherson gets captured in the process. The farmers then decide to flood the foxhole with Bean's cider, flushing the animals into the sewer. Bean's security guard, Rat, then appears and attacks the animals, but Mr. Fox kills him using an electric generator, and Rat gives away Christopherson's location. Mr. Fox tells the farmers that he's going to give himself over in exchange for Christopherson, but knowing that the farmers plan an ambush, the animals prepare for a counterattack. This creates an opening that allows Mr. Fox, Kylie, and Ash to sneak into Bean's farm. Ash rescues Christopherson and, using a feat of expert athleticism, releases a rabid beagle to distract the farmers while they make their getaway. The animals are all back together, but they are now stuck in the sewer. The movie ends with Mr. Fox discovering that the sewer has an exit that leads right into a grocery store that has more than enough food for the animals to survive down there forever. Mrs. Fox then says that she's pregnant, and Mr. Fox is delighted. Bogus, Bunce, and Bean wait for the foxes to emerge from the sewer indefinitely, while the foxes are actually robbing their store. This kind of seems like an odd ending when placed next to the book. They both end in the same way, with the foxes stuck underground but with a way to steal food from the farmers. Is the entire second half of the movie, after they are in this exact same situation in the foxhole only to be flushed into the sewer by Bean's cider, a complete waste? Just meaningless filler meant only to extend the runtime of the short story to feature length? I don't think so. It all has to do with what it means to be an animal or a non-animal. The fact that these characters are wild animals is brought up quite a bit in this story. Most stories about anthropomorphic animals bring it up a little bit, but this movie brings it up in enough serious scenes and uses it as a joke so rarely that I believe it's worth examining. When Mrs. Fox gets mad at Mr. Fox for going back on his word and stealing, this interaction happens.
12 fox years ago, you made a promise to me while we were caged inside that fox trap that if we survived, you would never steal another chicken, turkey, goose, duck, or squab, whatever they are. And I believed you. Why? Why did you lie to me?
Because I'm a wild animal.
You are also a husband and a father.
This shows that which is animalistic, in this case a fox stealing poultry, is immutable, and that which is unanimalistic, being a father and a husband, is mutable. Mr. Fox is a husband by choice, and a fox by circumstance, as shown in this scene.
Who am I, Kylie?
Who, how? What now?
Why a fox? Why not a horse or a beetle or a bald eagle? I'm saying this more as like existentialism, you know? Who am I? And how can a fox ever be happy without you'll forgive the expression, a chicken in its teeth?
I don't know what you're talking about, but it sounds illegal.
Here, put this bandit hat on.
Mr. Fox is questioning whether it'd even be healthy to neglect his natural desire to have a chicken in his teeth. If the animalistic is inherent, can't be chosen, then the unanimalistic is a product of choice, such as Mr. Fox's fatherhood and husbandry. Being unanimalistic, which from here on I will refer to as being human, both for the sake of brevity and because human is about as good of an antonym of animal as you're going to find, although not a good one in a scientific sense, means having desires beyond your animal, i.e. inherent desires, and following them. Other words for this would be ambition or adaptation, both things us humans are fluent in. The human versus animal conflict is shown in the story both literally, with the protagonist being animals and the antagonist being humans, and figuratively within its characterization. Kylie is an honest, simple person. He has no grand ambitions or desires. I consider him to be more or less the story's avatar of what it means to be animalistic. He often zones out, much like a possum playing dead. He doesn't want much more than food, water, shelter, and company, and he seems unable to question why he is the way he is. He's content, yet, even still, he has character growth by the end of the story. It might be small, but when he shows off his trademark, it shows he now has some desire to adapt and grow. Christopherson is the opposite. He's an expert at everything he tries. He's great at whack-bat, karate, and yoga, he's kind, meditates, and everyone likes him. The only problem is that the two things the story establishes are in the nature of foxes, living underground and stealing, he doesn't do. During the events of the story, he lives in the fox house, which is above ground, and he is extremely reluctant to steal. In fact, he was kidnapped when he tried to. He is completely unaware of his own nature, and is only able to adapt it. That being said, he shows growth near the end of the story. When the story concludes, he's living underground and stealing with the best of them. Ash is an interesting case because his natural desires are greater than a typical fox's. He's different, after all. In addition to the typical fox qualities of living underground and stealing, he also likes wearing his superhero outfit and has a small stature. His animal desires are hyper-developed, even if they lead to him being bullied, but he rejects them for that very reason. He doesn't believe his mom when she says it's okay to be different. On the other hand, his human desires are underdeveloped. They're certainly present. He wants to be an athlete, but his humanity isn't strong enough for him to actually adapt into being able to do it. Not until the end of the story, that is. He actually shows a full mastery of both the animalistic and the humanistic before any other character, when he saves Christopherson using his small size and performs an excellent athletic maneuver to unleash the rabies-infected beagle in quick succession. He doesn't need to no longer be different to be an athlete. He can be both different and an athlete. Mrs. Fox rejects one aspect of her animalhood, but not the other. She acknowledges that foxes live in holes for a reason, but is unwilling to accept that they steal for a reason too. Her animal side is underdeveloped, but her human side is healthy. She's mastered skills such as landscape painting and also cares deeply about being a good wife and mother. Eventually, she grows to accept that foxes steal, and her animal side goes from partial to full. Mr. Fox begins the story in the flashback at his most purely animalistic. He both lives in a hole and steals regularly. When we cut to present, we see that he no longer steals. He's a newspaper columnist, and while he may live underground, he's trying to move above ground. His human side, his ambition, is for everyone to like him. He lives on congratulations, and people calling him the fantastic Mr. Fox. At this brief juncture, in between moving above ground and returning to theft, he's purely human. So this time skip illustrates a massive character change. But eventually, this house of cards falls, and he returns to his animalistic stealing. At this point, he's got a fully developed human side, which he maintains through the whole story, and a half-developed animal side, much like his wife, but inverted. He loves stealing, but hates living in a hole, but the only thing that makes him not want to live underground is his human side telling him that living underground makes him, and his family, look poor. His developed humanity is a double-edged sword. This characterization continues through most of the movie, albeit with his half-developed animalism being poked at quite considerably, notably when his wife scratches him over it. The moment where this all changes is quite possibly the most infamous scene in the movie. Wes Anderson has said that the wolf scene is the reason why he wanted to adapt this story in the first place, which is odd considering that it doesn't appear in the original book. Up until this point in the story, Mr. Fox has been shown to have a phobia of wolves. Not just the understandable fear of wolves that it would make sense for any fox to have, but an outright phobia, fear to an unnecessary and excessive degree. He admits this outright, right before the scene begins. After spotting the wolf, Mr. Fox tries to approach it as a human. He tries to speak to it in English and French and bond over their Latin names, much like he did with the other burrowing animals, but the wolf doesn't respond. After a while, he admits that he has a phobia of wolves, but the wolf still doesn't respond. Finally, with all the other options tapped, he raises his hand in a sign of solidarity, and the wolf does the same. I think it's fair to say that the wolf represents some kind of pure, raw animalism, without any trappings of the human whatsoever. It can't speak, it's on all fours, in comparison to the other animals we follow, which are all standing upright like a human, and it doesn't even seem capable of learning how to do either. It's a pure, wild animal, and this is the creature that Mr. Fox has been so afraid of this whole story. He's afraid of what it means to be a fully realized animal, afraid to resolve his half-developed animalism. His tail, the most bestial thing about him, was shot off his body, making his body plan the same as a human's. He's been approaching his animal side through his human side this whole time. He's okay with stealing because it suits his goal of living the high life, but neglects living underground because other people might judge him. But now that he's confronted with this entity of raw animalism, which he has no way of approaching as a human, he's forced to approach it as an equal, an animal. He raises his fist in solidarity and mutual understanding, and reconciles his conflicting human and animal sides. At the end of the movie, he's back to stealing, and everyone in the community genuinely likes him, but he's still living underground, except this time in a sewer instead of a foxhole. But he doesn't care. In fact, he's happy as can be. In the final scene of the movie, right as all the animals start to starve in their underground homes, Mr. Fox finds out that the sewer leads right into Bogus Bunsen Bean's grocery store. The day is saved, and this concludes the arcs of most of all the foxes we've been following. Now they're all able to live underground, steal, and have their individual ambitions fulfilled. Particularly Mr. Fox, who all the animals now love after he discovers more food than they could ever need. In the last moments of the movie, Mr. Fox gives this speech.
They say all foxes are slightly allergic to linoleum, but it's cool to the paw. Try it. They say my tail needs to be dry cleaned twice a month, but now it's fully detachable, see? They say our tree may never grow back, but one day something will. Yes, these crackles are made of synthetic goose, and these giblets come from artificial squab, and even these apples look fake. But at least they've got stars on them.
Foxes are both mildly allergic to linoleum and enjoy stepping on it. The apples are both fake-looking and have stars on them. The tree will both never grow back and will allow something else to grow in its place. They are all both animal and human, their natures and their ambitions. One doesn't need to be sacrificed for the other. Mr. Fox's tail, the thing that was shot off of his body to symbolize his disconnection from his animalism, he is now fully able to attach and remove as he sees fit. I think my description of the human could be misinterpreted as some kind of German existentialist cry that you have full control over every aspect of your life and all you need is enough willpower, and my description of the animal could be misinterpreted as stating that there lies within you some kind of deep down sacred essence that is your true self, which you should never stray away from. But I don't think myself nor the movie are trying to say either of those. In the simplest terms, I think the movie is trying to say that you shouldn't lose yourself to your ambitions, and that you also shouldn't become so content with your own standing that you lose the desire to change and grow yourself in the world around you. But the thing is, how is this exactly supposed to be applied to us? The animal part of this dichotomy refers to the natures of the literal animals these characters are. Ignoring for a moment the fact that we've been calling that which is an animal human, what exactly is human nature? I sure don't know. It might not even exist. People have been trying to figure out what it is or isn't for thousands of years, but the movie never once tries to give an answer, so I don't think that's quite it. I think the answer lies in the character of Ash. Compared to the other foxes, he's different. His animal side is way more expansive than theirs. He may also like stealing and living underground, but he's also small and enjoys wearing strange clothes. The thing is, he doesn't wear that outfit out of ambition, nor out of a product of his genetics. He wears it because he likes a comic where a superhero wears the same outfit. It's just a personality trait. And I think that's ultimately how the animal applies to us. Our animalism is our personalities, ourselves as individuals. It's not what makes us both human beings, it's what makes you you and me. This whole idea of the animal versus the human is not present in the original book, which was a simple story about theft and the prevention of it. And those elements are still in this version, but the movie adds so much thematic depth and expansion of the world and characters to the book's framework. A lot is made about adaptations being true to the original. Quality and closeness to the original are seen by many to be ostensibly the same thing. But aren't they already different stories by virtue of being different stories? If I want to experience Roald Dahl's Fantastic Mr. Fox, I'll read his version. And if I want to experience Wes Anderson's Fantastic Mr. Fox, I'll watch his. An adaptation can never detract from the original, nor can it add to it. They are, naturally, different beasts that only appear to be the same, so why not run with it? Why not take elements of the original and remix them, play with them, make them your own? So much was added to the story, and certain important details, such as Mrs. Fox being supportive of Mr. Fox's stealing ways, had to be changed to fit that in. And that's great! Why should an adaptation pretend to be something it isn't? It's not the original and never will be. Turning it into a shallow imitation doesn't inherently make it any better. So much love, time, and effort was put into making this movie what it is, and now it stands alone, as its own masterpiece, separate from the work that provided its scaffolding.